Invader Zim was a cartoon that changed a generation and became a pop culture phenomenon. One that still has a monopoly on Hot Topic merchandise racks all around the world. The show practically created its own alternative cult subculture in the early 2000s. Despite only having an initial runtime between 2001 and 2002, after being cancelled in the middle of its second season, the series left a lasting impression on the animation industry and quirky memes for years to come. With the release of its wildly anticipated movie, Enter the Florpus, fans were delighted for the return of Invader Zim's endearing yet grotesque comedy that they longed for ever since their childhoods. Today, however, we're gonna dive right into the good, the bad, and the downright evil of Invader Zim, which is quite the difficult task considering the vast majority of characters are villains or wannabes. But we're confident that a few of our rankings might even surprise the hardened fans. Maybe this time consider it less of a list of who's the best and more of a list of who's the best at being the worst. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Good to Evil Invader Zim.
I am a perfectly normal human worm baby.
First on our list is Clem Brain.
Is that supposed to be my dad?
If you haven't seen the new Invader Zim movie, Clem Brain is a clone of Professor Membrane that Zim creates some time after the series finale and before the events of the film. His evil plan was for the clone to take the professor's place and then ground Dib forever, leaving Zim to do whatever he liked.
You is grounded forever!
However, Clem Brain is ultimately considered a failure, not because he, quite frankly, looks and acts absolutely nothing like Professor Membrane, but because he doesn't make the pudding that Dib loves quite right. You can't blame the guy for trying. Clem Brain, to be frank, is kind of incapable of being evil. Sure, he works with Zim to begin with, but he's so convinced that he's the real professor that his love for Dib and Gaz is enough that he's willing to turn on Zim for them. All this guy really wants is to go around and make pudding for everyone, even if it's arguably the lesser kind.
Ooh, I see what you mean.
The worst thing that he's capable of is throwing a toddler-level tantrum if anyone questions his authenticity as the real Professor Membrane. But considering his rather unethical creation, no one can really fault him for being confused. Next on our list is Gur. A fan favorite from the beginning, especially with his adorable iconic dog suit, in many ways where everyone else was designed to be kinda gross and gritty, Gur is, well, totally adorable. He is Zim's hyperactive robotic assistant and is really the closest thing the guy has to a friend. Similarly to Clem Brain, the little guy is just incapable of being truly evil. He shows relatively little interest in Zim's plans, generally going back to whatever he was doing immediately after Zim issues an order. Sure, he is involved with some shady stuff, which is a natural consequence of being the sidekick to Zim, but to be honest, Gur's intelligence is obviously lacking. He doesn't really have the capacity to understand why something is wrong. I mean, he's kind of defective to say the least. He does have some moments of clarity, but there's far more examples of Zim taking advantage of his relative ignorance.
But if the big splody goes fast, won't it get all bad?
One suspicious thing about Gur, however, is his uncanny ability to make others do things, bend to his will even. Specifically, he shows a strange capability of manipulating people to dance for him. He does this both with Zim and Gaz on two separate occasions.
Only if you dance with me!
Could there be something a bit more sinister in Gur's mind games? I suppose this power could be used for evil, but chances are Gur has no intentions of using it for anything other than his own silly enjoyment, which we totally approve of. It might be surprising for some hardcore fans to see Dib this early on the list, but we've decided to do the controversial thing in placing him here.
Anyone? Questions?
Many fans agree that Dib is the actual villain of the series, and seeing as Zim is the main character, he is definitely the antagonist. But does being the antagonist to Zim of all people really make you evil? Probably not. After all, Zim is essentially an anti-hero, and on some level, Dib's intense determination, even at the mocking of his peers, to protect Earth from Zim's invasion is rather admirable. Invader Zim is special in its own way for not having Dib be the protagonist, and it's better for it. But just because Invader Zim's subversive morality makes Dib the bad guy, so to speak, it doesn't actually mean he's the bad guy, if that makes sense. And to be fair, he's 12 years old. Of course, if Dib were all good, he'd be at the start of the list, but like any desperate and vengeful kid, he's prone to his revenge fantasies, some of which are a little gruesome. Specifically, his dream of dissecting Zim for fame and fortune is a little heinous, and thus puts him a little lower on the list. Still, one could argue that he's essentially the show's good guy. Next up is Gaz, Dib's younger sister.
Are there any video games around here?
The show's main female character, she is, as some fans might describe her, a true neutral. While not downright evil, she has a short fuse and can be creepy and rather dark most of the time. She also shows a surprising lack of empathy or camaraderie towards her family in the series, and is rarely seen smiling. She's known for vowing revenge on anyone who stands in her way or otherwise interferes with her, and she usually gets her way in the end. A notable example of her vengeance is when she destroys one of Dib's missions simply because he ate the last slice of pizza. Petty, but completely understandable.
Vengeance will be mine.
On the flip side, however, it's important to remember once again that Gaz is about 10 to 12 years old, and anyone who's met a preteen will be aware that sometimes they're just like that. And Enter the Florpus shows that she does have some affectionate feelings towards her family. She even says she's only tough on her brother because she knows he can take it, showing that she does in fact care for him in her own way. Aw, who would have thought?
I only torment you because I know you can handle it.
Next on our list is our show's protagonist, Zim. Objectively, as an alien invader desperate to conquer planet Earth, he's pretty evil.
You left us stranded in the middle of the enemy territory!
There's no question about that. Zim may be the protagonist of the series, but he's by no means the good guy. Even for Anarchan, who are already imperialist invaders of unsuspecting planets, he's pretty dark. His tendency to seek destruction and overzealously pursue his goals of annihilation not only puts Earth in danger, but also his fellow Urkans as well. He's brash, arrogant, and to be honest, a complete megalomaniac. Zim is cocky and self-congratulatory whenever he makes even a small amount of headway, which is very rare. To be honest, he's so incompetent at being evil at times, it's hard to even see him as a threat. Often the biggest threat is his own ignorance and his determination to be evil, rather than his evil plans themselves. However, in Enter the Florpus, he's shown that he actually does have the potential to be a serious threat when he puts his mind to it. He's willing to complete the mission, even if it results in his own death in the process.
Zim has won!
To be fair, Zim only seems to have interest in conquering Earth, rather than enslaving humanity and running the planet himself. When a group of humans actually do announce their loyalty to him, he can't wait to get away from them. He seems most comfortable in ensuring destruction rather than gaining power. In a lot of ways, Zim kind of represents someone so obsessed with his work that he builds his identity around it. Not knowing that if he were to accomplish his goals, he probably wouldn't be happy, because the work that he's built his identity around is now gone. Zim is essentially a dog chasing cars.
Must self-destruct!
Next up, Tak, despite her minor screen time, managed to achieve some evil in her one episode.
Hi, my name's Tak.
She's determined to take Zim's mission since he ruined her training as an invader, and she blames him for her subsequent punishment. Deeply vindictive, she sets out on conquering Earth in Zim's place and is clearly the better invader of the two, and she's obviously aware of this fact. Her plan to annihilate Earth, strip it of its magma, and fill its core with sweets to appease the tallest shows a level of ruthless cunningness and manipulation that other characters only strive for. Another surprise entry here is Miss Bitters.
Oh, you poor doomed child.
Even considering she's typically described as an old hag, incapable of positive emotion, it still might be tough to understand why she's higher on this list than other characters. Well, teachers like Miss Bitters are objectively the worst and should not, under any circumstances, be allowed to teach children. She greatly hates kids, and most other things, and constantly intimidates them whenever they do something wrong. To be honest, intimidating children shouldn't be ranked as worse than trying to invade Earth, but, well, it's kind of all the same.
Destined to collapse under its own weight.
Especially when she does so in such a demonic yet oddly familiar way. In some shape or form, we've all had a teacher like Miss Bitters. And although she's not capable of taking over the Earth, she's someone who would probably spread that level of negativity if she had the ability to do so. The only difference is, she lacks the means. But at the end of the day, she's a teacher who's lousy at her job and shouldn't be let anywhere near kids. And yes, she is rather evil. But all the same, she's not quite evil enough to land her at the bottom of our list. Unsurprisingly, near the end of our list, we have the almighty tallest.
The almighty tallest!
Hardcore fans of the series will remember how the Urkin's hierarchy works in the series. For those who may be rusty on their Urkin knowledge, however, here's a recap. Society works in a strict hierarchical class structure where the taller the Urkin is, the more power they have in society. The tallest Urkin at any given time is given the role of the tallest, and they become ruler over the entirety of the empire.
Oh, no, that's just sad.
Should it come about that there are two Urkins of the exact same height, such as in the case with red and purple, they must share the leadership. Regardless, this kind of imperial class structure is as completely pointless as it is evil. Aside from invading other planets, attempting to destroy Earth, and the general obvious evilness.
Oh, and remember, lasers. The universe will be ours for the taking!
But it's food for thought all the same. Aren't all imperial dictators instated due to some equally ridiculous notion of merit? Be it wealth, status, bloodline, or something else. Any so-called justification for a dictatorship is just as silly as electing someone because they're tall.
Did that scare you too?
Naturally, such a useless election system leads to abuses of power, and the tallest are, as a result, prone to being cruel, vindictive, and malevolent. And they tend to pointlessly torment and dispense of even highly ranked Urkin soldiers, as they're all expendable to them. I mean, remember the airlock scene?
Seize that guy and, throw him out the airlock!
But still, the tallest are not the lowest down on our list. So who have we declared as the most evil character in Invader Zim? Well, we've decided the role goes to Professor Membrane, Dib and Gaz's father. You may be thinking, sure, the guy is a bit of an absentee father and seems to have a stranglehold on Earth technology, but evil?
I don't sign autographs backstage, little boy.
Sure, this may be a controversial choice, but we definitely have our reasons to be highly suspicious of the real nature of Professor Membrane. It's been fan conjecture for a while now that the good doctor has actually been experimenting on his children the whole time, and it gets even worse. Take this theory from Reddit user MateOGG for a start. They point out that Dib has higher than normal intelligence, to the point where he's immune to tax technology. They suggest this is because Professor Membrane experimented on him to increase his intelligence, fearing that he otherwise wouldn't live up to the Membrane legacy. This could also explain his abnormally large head, something he's repeatedly teased for in the show.
Maybe my head is big.
Interestingly, Gaz is devoid of empathy, obedient to her father, and above average in hand-eye coordination. Is it possible that she's been experimented on too to turn her into a super soldier bodyguard for Dib? It gets even creepier than that though. Sources say that, had the series continued and not been cancelled by Nickelodeon, it would have been revealed that Professor Membrane isn't Dib's father at all.
What is this?
In fact, Dib is a clone of Professor Membrane. But why would the professor clone himself? Could it just be, as we hypothesized earlier, that he needed someone to continue the Membrane legacy? Maybe not quite. It's said that one of the episodes never produced explained why Dib is so unlucky and why he seems perpetually destined for failure. And that's because he was part of an experiment to create the unluckiest person alive. When you think about it, it gets even more sinister. Flashbacks to Professor Membrane's childhood show that his was quite an unlucky one too, such as getting an endless supply of socks for Christmas and being attacked by sharks. Could he have experimented on Dib as a means to reroute his bad karma? The professor certainly seems to not have any issues with his luck as an adult. If this is truly the intended path for the series, it proves that Professor Membrane is a bigger villain than any of the Urkins could hope to be. Without the unreleased episodes, however, his specific reasons for experimenting on his children remain a mystery, although we can very easily argue that there's most likely no not evil reason for it. So why else does Membrane deserve to be the most evil on our list?
Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?
Well, his global science empire is definitely not as benevolent as he'd like it to seem, and his stranglehold over the industry is deeply sinister. The positive public opinion of him seems artificial and manipulated, and he seems to think anything is morally justifiable if it's for science, including locking Gaz in a cage, comparing her to a pig. To be honest, the guy is downright sinister and therefore earns his place as most evil character in Invader Zim. But what do you think? Do you agree with us that Professor Membrane is actually the most evil? And do you agree with the rest of our Invader Zim rankings too? Let us know in the comments section below. Also, let us know which cartoon we should feature on Good to Evil next. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But most importantly, stay wicked.